Glenn.
Hey.
It's been a while.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, I know we've kind of neglected our YouTube videos for the last several months, and sorry to have done that for a lot of reasons, but anyway, we're kind of back at it. Today's video will be about grinding a slot in a block, like this.
Okay. Seems simple enough.
Yeah, we have a piece of hardened steel. It's important that it's hardened.
Right.
And there are a number of ways to grind the slot to different forms of accuracy. For example, do we want the slot to be centrally located on the block?
Yes.
Maybe, maybe not, but in this case, let's say we do, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, do we want it to be held to a size that is from here to here and here to here and overall? That makes it even more complicated.
Right.
And then do we want a slip fit? Do we want a thousandths limit, 2/1000ths? What do we want? In this case, we're going to work on a slip fit. So we're going to have to hold this within a couple of tenths. We may want to hold it central as well, so when we get in the shop, we can grind this accordingly. The first thing we're going to do with this block, though, is we're going to grind it all over.
Okay.
Why are we going to do that? Because I want to make sure that we have a good surface on the bottom, and we have a good surface here and here as well. The top we don't care too much about, or the ends. Let's assume that we have to hold this to 250 thousandths. Mm-hmm. And that may or may not be what we're going to be using, but let's assume that for the moment. All right, now what else do we need? Well, we need a surface grinder to do it, and this chuck that we have sitting here is simulating the surface grinder chuck.
Okay.
So when we get into the shop, we will be putting the block on the surface grinder chuck. But for purposes of this demonstration, I wanted to bring a chuck in here and show you how it is we're going to be doing this. Now, another important key is the grinding wheel. And the grinding wheel is actually very, very important to make the proper selection. What do I mean by that, Glenn?
Well, you want to make sure it's the right hardness and thickness.
The right hardness and the right grain. Remember, we usually grind at about a 46H, 46 being the grain and H being the degree of hardness. Right. So if we go up from 46 to 60, we went from H to I.
So the letters are the hardness.
The letters are the hardness. Mm-hmm. If we go to a 60, we've got to go up one grade of hardness to obtain the same degree of hardness in a finer wheel.
Okay.
Is that clear? Did I make that pretty clear? I think so.
Yeah.
So if we go to an 80, we want to go to an 80J. That gives us the same degree of hardness as if we had a 46H. Okay. Because we are grinding a slot, we can't use 46. It's too coarse. 60 to 80 would be my preference. Why? Because it breaks down a lot sooner. Okay. Now, you may notice the wheel is straight all the way across.
Correct.
That's not going to get it.
Right. No?
No. No, we've got to relieve this.
Go in there and
we want to grind with a point. So looking at the blackboard here, if this simulates our wheel, we're going to have to go in here and relieve this on both sides like that.
Okay.
So we want to point down at the bottom here, which looks like this. This is the area that's going to be doing the work, right here. And as we grind, this is going to start.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. When you do your passes, it's going to start.
It's going to start breaking down.
Right.
So we have to be very, very careful that we don't break it down too much, because if we do, we get over in here. What happens when we get to the bottom of the slot?
You end up getting a...
It's going to be a different size down here than it will be up here if we're not careful.
Right.
So what I like to do is when I'm making my finish pass, after I get close, I'll redress the wheel and relieve it again.
Oh, okay.
And sharpen the point again.
How many times you get to...
well, you can do that till the wheel gets too thin, and then it gets dangerous. You know, when your wheel gets down, if it gets down around 1/8 of an inch, that's time to stop, because now we're going to have a problem with the wheel being... that could explode. It's possible. It doesn't. It's rare that it ever happens, but certainly safety needs to be number one. All right, so let's look at the slot. Now, again, when we're grinding this slot, it's important that we take a good look at the pattern that we're going to get in this slot. What do I mean by that? Well, we call it a crisscross.
Oh, that, yeah.
If the wheel, for example,
It almost looks like brushed steel.
almost. If the wheel, for example, is cocked this way, you're going to get a pattern that on this side, it's going to be hitting here, and on the back side, it's going to be hitting there.
Right.
What does that mean? It means you could get a taper in there.
Okay.
But how do you fix that? You really can't. It's actually the machine itself that would be a problem or would be at fault. If you have a crisscross pattern in there, it tells you that the machine is in pretty good shape. That means that the spindle itself is square with the chuck.
Okay.
Now there's another possibility, and that's that it could be tipped this way, that way, this way, or that way. We are going to assume that the machine that we're going to be using is up to snuff.
The bubble and everything is...
Everything is parallel and square. If it's not, it would have to be out, again, an awful lot.
That's in one of your other videos, isn't it?
Yep, it is in one of our other videos, and we talk about that. So, another issue is this rail right here. What I like to do before I do anything is I want to go in there with my same grinding wheel and just dust this back rail. Just clean it up a little bit to make sure that it's parallel with the machine. Why do I want to do that? Because if this is on an angle, I like to exaggerate things. It's easier for me to see things if I exaggerate them. So if this thing were off that much, you would be grinding this on an angle. It wouldn't be a taper. You'd be grinding it on an angle. So when you take it off and you check it, you'd say, wow, this slot is now like so and like so. It's not, it doesn't affect the size, because when I turn it around, you're still parallel to this even though it's wrong.
Right.
What you end up having, the result is you have the slot on an angle. You can still be at size, but it'll be on an angle. We don't want that. If we want it to be parallel with the bottom here, within a few tenths, let's say, we've got to dust the rail. We've got to do that first. So let's go ahead and talk about, or let's take a look at this pattern. Again, we could put an undercut down here, like so, and that would provide some clearance for the edge of the wheel to go down in that slot.
Okay.
That would mean from here up, we would be nice and straight if we put an undercut in here. Maybe we don't have to put an undercut in there. Maybe the slot itself only has to be good to, say, somewhere down in here. So we can grind it there, but our size is only important from here up. And in that case, this is, the blueprint would tell you whether you need to put an undercut in there or you don't.
Okay.
If the print says you don't need an undercut, it may say, well, we want this to be 1/4 inch deep, and if you're down here at the 3/8, let's say, then this 1/8 of an inch down here doesn't make any difference. It's not going to affect the size. Okay. So we don't have an undercut, and I'm going to assume that we're going to try to get this down here within, say, 50 thousandths. So if my wheel breaks down to 100 thousandths, I'm going to be up in this area. That's not good.
Right.
Then I'll end up with a taper in there. The big thing is that, believe it or not, this wheel will bend.
Okay.
When you're grinding, when you come into this slot, and that wheel comes in here and hits the tip here, as the wheel is entering the slot, it gets right in here and it starts pushing the wheel away. And the same thing on when you're on the back side when you're coming off. The wheel will bend, and let me show you on the part here. And this is what I mean. When I'm coming in here like so, as I enter this, that when you're dealing with a couple of tenths, that's very, very close tolerance. And the wheel will push it, it'll actually push away until you get to about here. Once you get the full wheel in the part, now you're going to be good.
Okay.
But then when you start coming off, it does the same thing.
How do you prevent that?
That's a really good question. You make sure that this wheel that point is dead sharp. And as we're grinding, it's going to glaze up, and you're going to see it get shiny down here at the tip, which is right in this area, and that's a problem because that means that it's getting dull and you have to dress it. So the ideal thing is to get close to size, and this is what I like to do, and different grinder hands have different opinions about it, but then I like to dress the wheel and just take a light dusting, particularly when I'm getting close to size.
When you dress the wheel again and again, isn't it getting shorter?
No,
Less?
no, it's getting narrower.
It's getting narrower now.
Not shorter.
Yeah, when that, how do you avoid
Well,
that?
once the wheel gets to, about like so,
Right?
it could start getting a little bit dangerous because the wheel gets too thin.
Wouldn't it make this cut in even narrower?
Nope, no, it has nothing to do with it because the wheel's still going to be at the same depth.
Oh, okay.
The wheel's still at the same depth, but that's a good question. Yeah, we're not going up.
You're not going to go up, you're just looking to do down there.
That's correct. So our wheel's going to come in, it's going to push away, then it's going to be fine, and then it's going to push away again, and you're going to end up getting a taper in this thing.
Right.
The trick to all of that, to remove the taper and to make sure you don't get a taper, is to make sure that the wheel is sharp. That's the key, the key ingredient to making sure we get a good straight slot. Again, if you're holding a couple of thousandths, it's not that bad. But if you're trying to hold a few tenths, it's very, very important that the wheel remains sharp. At the end of the day, will we use a whole wheel to grind this slot? Probably not.
Okay.
It depends on how we dress it. Some people will go in there and just get a little bit too aggressive, and they'll relieve it way up in here like this.
Oh.
And there's no need to do that. You need to have a relief in here. If this is your slot,
In a sense, so it's not binding.
if that's your slot right there,
Right.
you just need to make sure that this area right here is clear.
Okay.
You don't want to dress it, you don't want to clear it so it's not like that. If you were to clear it like this, then it's going to rub up here. So you've got to make sure that you have adequate clearance in there.
Right. Yeah.
That's pretty much it. So we want to make sure, just to recap, wheel is sharp, part is square. We're going to grind this part all over. We're going to grind top, bottom, and we're not going to grind the ends because it's not important for this demonstration. But we will grind the top, the bottom, and the sides, which will be very important. And we'll grind them so they're square and parallel.
Okay.
And again, we like to look for a crisscross pattern. And you know what you will find too, when the wheel enters, you'll end up with something like this, right here.
Oh, 'cause that's
That tells you, and when you're coming off the part at this other end, you're going to end up with the opposite, like so. That is a key that says to you,
you got it right.
no, it says to you got a problem. If you don't have a crisscross here, it's going to
Really?
give you a taper because the wheel is pushing away going in,
Oh, okay.
and it's pushing away coming
There you
out.
go.
So the crisscross, if you are getting one from the machine, that's a good thing.
Right.
And that will tell you again, when you see this pattern,
At the end.
one direction here, both directions here, and only one direction there, you're going to end up with a taper in a part.
Is that from
It's
going
gonna-
too fast?
It's from the wheel being glazed.
Oh.
The wheel gets dull, it pushes away, so that's a real problem.
Okay.
So that's pretty much it. The next video will be going out in the shop, and we will actually grind the part. So Glenn, what do you think about this so far?
Do I get to grind?
Well, I don't know about that, but you get to go out there with me. How's that? So anyway, thank you for coming. It's great seeing you again. Been a long time.
Seeing you, yeah.
We'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.
Cool.
Thanks for watching.
Look forward.